At the bottom, it says, I'm ready to pump. That's the button you click to go in. I
Yes.
click that. The website that sits behind this, I am at least 85% sure I've already had money stolen because of how this website looks.
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Doogles, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
Would it be our player haters?
You gotta work on your intros.
No, these are perfection. Perfection. How you doing, man?
Uh, Doing great. I
You
do have
can't
some
get over
bad
that.
news for you, Douglas.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Tell me.
They are rationing Guinness in the United Kingdom.
Oh, curses. How does one live? Curses.
This is
Is that
great
what you
when
wanna-
you're a Diageo stockholder like me.
That is true.
You knew it was coming,
hold
didn't
on.
you?
Are you rationing Guinness? Are you cornering the market? Is this what you're doing? Is this a whole premeditated situation?
For my stock picks, I want to put it past me. Yeah.
That's true.
Seems like a
That's
good
true.
idea.
Very tricky. No, it is fascinating. Actually, this week, a number of the stocks that you had discussed in the sector that is alcohol, whatever it's called, discretionary beverages. I'm not sure what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
This was a fine week for those from a news perspective. I don't actually know how the stocks moved.
Yeah, me either.
Oh, I love it. I love it. All right. Can we get things started? You cool with that?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So first, before we hop in, if y'all got listener mail, you got questions, you got comments, you got thoughts, you got concerns, please hit us up, skippydoogles@gmail.com. And as you all know, best way to support the show is to become a premium listener. We do not do advertising on the show. We get asked and we say no. But if you want to become a premium listener, it helps us out to run the show. skippydoogles.supercast.com. Check out, we got two different options there. Check them both out. Okay, now, here's the dilly, okay? You ready for this? I'm going to ask you for advice on this fine day. Can you do that for me?
Yes.
Okay, here's what I need. This is going to be, I'll put this in the general realm of business advice, but more specifically, it's probably like managerial advice. So I hit an issue this week at work, and I need your assistance with it. This week, big presentation, huge presentation I had to give. And my boy Jeremy was supposed to be like putting everything together, getting all the stuff going for my presentation. I trust Jeremy. Man does pretty good work. We had a 9:30 a.m. meeting. I'm sitting there, 9:32, 9:35, 9:40, 9:43. No Jeremy. I'm texting, I'm emailing. I get nothing from Jeremy. Jeremy, doth he not log into the Zoom at 9:47 a.m.? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, Jeremy, this doesn't seem like you. What's up? You know what he says to me?
No.
You're late to work. Who gives a f? It's your life. You boss, I'm late. I'm late. I'm late. I'm late. I'm late. What you gonna be doing about it? I said I'm late. I'm late. I'm late. I'm late. I'm late. You gonna fire me? There's no one else here. Late. I'm late. I'm late. I'm late. I'm late. I'm late. You gonna fire me? That's cute. Late. 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 Ah.
Is this...
What do I do?
Give Jeremy a raise, man. It's that I wasn't sure if you were joking. Is that really the Google guy from like 2 years ago?
Yeah, I'm 99.9% sure. I mean, he looks exactly the same. For those of you who've been around for a minute, a couple years ago, we were talking about was it Google I/O? I think it might have been Google I/O, whatever their big thing was. And they hired this dude who's like an eclectic music maker, DJ, to run around in a bathrobe, jumping around, screaming Google. I am 99.9% sure this is him.
That dude at the Google show, I think he started in a bathtub in a Google robe, and then he like put on his crazy techno music. He took off the Google robe, and everyone lost their mind, and he had another Google robe underneath. That is really something. This guy Eclectic is putting it nicely there, too.
Yes. Yeah. I saw this and it went, it's like, is this the state of the American worker now? Like we're doomed. We're doomed. Thank you for entertaining me with that. I appreciate it.
That was scary, man. All that language. You got some work to do on the
Yeah.
editing.
Beep. I got a lot of beeps going on. Where do you actually want to kick
Oh,
things off? I know you got something in mind.
well, no, let's just tie up a bow from last week. Last week, almost unintentionally, we didn't talk about it much in the pre-show meeting. We ended up talking about how expensive the US stock market is and market capitalization versus the world and everything else. I saw like 5 other authors I respect write about that this week. And so let me tack some numbers on. We talked about some of this stuff, but let me tack some numbers onto that because I think it puts a nice bow on it. Here's the amazing thing, Doogles. It's 2021 all over again. 2021 got a little bubbly. We talked about it, pulled back quickly, and everything went on kind of as expected. And we're back to those valuation levels. The thing I hate about this most, more than anything else, is that you said you thought this was going to happen.
I know you hate that. I know you do. I'm putting out I don't know if these listeners will get it in this timeline, but this is when I'm writing it. I'm putting out my quarterly blog post this weekend. Title, Deja Vu All Over Again.
Foreshadowing. Look at that.
Post-shadowing as well.
Okay, so a few facts. For the first time in history, the market capitalization of all active stocks in the United States is more than twice the nation's gross domestic product. First time in history. That's from Global Financial Data. We talked briefly about Shiller PE ratio last week in basically July of 2021. It was 38.6. Today, it is 38.9. Again, back to 2021. All-time high for the U.S. there is 44.1 in 1999. U.S. market cap weighting, we talked a little bit about this. Current market cap weighting of the U.S., basically 66%. Let's compare that to GDP. So U.S. or stock market cap weighting, equity market cap weighting, U.S. is at 66%, followed by Japan at about 5%, Britain at about 3%, Canada at about 3%. It goes on down the line. China at 2.4%. GDP weighting, U.S. is 26% of world GDP. China is 17% of world GDP. I can guarantee all the listeners on the show are sick of us talking about China. That right there is the reason we're talking about China. 17% of world GDP and 2.5% of stock market value. There's a mismatch there. Like Japan, 4% of world GDP and roughly 5% of stock value. That makes perfect sense. So all those numbers, they just hopefully tie up a bow on what we talked about last week. They're not necessarily actionable, right? There's a lot of unknowns with where we're headed with new president. Stocks can stay really expensive for a long time. But like I always say, if you're uncomfortable with those things, you have a chance to change your diversification strategy at the very least, or at least glance at it again to see what it might look like if the U.S. pulls back.
Research thoughts coming here on the China International train, but it is really, really interesting. And one thing, if you go back to 2021, I was trying to get the numbers in front of me so I could talk specifics right quick. But if I remember correctly, I think we got in these days a bit more of that Avril Lavigne going on. You know, she'd be like, "Why you got to make things so concentrated?" Because back in 2021, if my memory serves me, I think the top 10 U.S. stocks made something like 30% of the market, and today they're closer to 40% of the market. That's off top of my head. I'll fact check and we can put that on the Substack on Monday, like what the accurate numbers are, but something like that. So we moved more in that direction. Thank you, Avril.
Yeah. Now, I think we'll talk about this at the end of the show, but what has happened to U.S. stocks? What has happened when U.S. stocks get bubbly in the past 8 years is that crypto also gets pretty bubbly. Like I said, Doogles, I think we should save that for the end. But man, there's some scary stuff happening in crypto right now. You want to talk hard marks, or you want to talk about that first?
I mean, you just brought it up.
All right,
so
let's
I feel
go.
like yeah.
Okay, quick intro, and then I'm going to let you get to all your fun with your boy, Michael Saylor. there is this article in Forbes. I'm just going to touch on it on a super high level. If you casually follow crypto like I have, you've noticed that one of the coins that just seems out of whack with its true use cases is Solana. Solana is famous because one, Chamath and others dumped it on the public and basically robbed people.
Yep.
But Solana was developed by a former Qualcomm guy, and its properties are basically that it's the fastest processing coin. So, especially in the old days of Bitcoin and Ethereum and everything else, like you'd wait forever for your transaction to happen. Your transaction would be super expensive, and it just wasn't very usable. Solana was like, no, my main goal is to be quick, usable, hopefully safe. That enables a lot of things. And what it's enabled today is a website called pump.fun. Have you heard of pump.fun?
No, I got to go there right now. You promised me this is safe for the kids?
It's scary. It's scary. I mean, okay, so if you want to create your own coin, Doogles, it used to work that you have to have some seed capital. Sometimes only as little as $5,000, but you have to create a market for this coin. So Doogles wants to go out and create the Doogles cryptocurrency, right? There's no barrier to entry. There's really, it used to take some coding. It doesn't take much coding anymore. Now you can go to a website like pump.fun, and if you want, create your coin and then put your coin out on an open market with no seed capital. They use, I'm not going to go into the details, but they use some fancy math. Do you have a reaction before I get into that?
I do. So let me just describe something. You go to pump.fun. There's a pop-up that comes up that has a whole bunch of language, gibberty josh language. At the bottom, it says, I'm ready to pump. That's the button you click to go in. Yes. I click that. The website that sits behind this, I am at least 85% sure I've already had money stolen because of how this website looks. Like all the buttons are bouncing around. There's like memes everywhere. How could you possibly keep going? Then I might say more.
Anyway, they allow people to create Solana coins, and they allow them to get that into a market with a math equation with no seed capital. And so there are thousands of coins being created every day. And they basically, there's no intended purpose. The idea is to do the craziest thing because people are just looking through this list of thousands of newly created coins, trying to figure out which one to pump, right, Doogles? Like, so I checked this out this week. I actually thought about pumping for a second. And you know what coin was there?
What?
The Haktua coin.
There the it is.
Coin. There was another one. There were some really clever names. It was basically like, at this point, it's a billboard. Like it has nothing to do with commerce or currency. Or it's like, oh, that's a funny idea. If I if I decided to take part in the pump.fun, it would be like, oh, here's 7 cents for this guy's clever idea. That's all it really is. But the way this website works, if the market cap of this coin lifts is $90,000, then the website, I think, takes a 17% fee off of that. And it like graduates to the next level of there's basically enough cash changing hands that it can kind of start to independently act on an exchange. And then you pray that you would pray for it to create enough legitimacy that someone like Binance or Coinbase actually decides to list the thing. And if that ever happens, it's like you bought IPO of a Microsoft or something, right? Because the market cap becomes such that. And so the article in Forbes is so fascinating because it's all about people who create these coins, the mindset of people who do this as like a thing, because they feel like even though it's basically playing the lotto, it's their best chance at creating wealth. It's all bubbly, scary, but also amazingly fascinating to me.
I'll give you fascinating and creative. There's a lot of creativity that goes into
I don't know that I'm
like
ready
this. Okay, I'm trying really because this website.
Although one meme coin that is a success from pump.fun is Godius Maximus, aka Goat, which is currently worth 840 million, or at least it was at the time this article was written. There were a few other fun names in here for sure. Yeah, there is some creativity behind it. The scary part, there's so much scary about this, is like you said, I would not be surprised if your identity's already been stolen, Doogles. But the way that if you decide that you want to create a coin, the only way to do it is, or you have to go promote it, right? And so that leads you back to the Hawk Tua coin and the fraud that happened there this week, where a bunch of people had money stolen. And I think there will be SEC action taken from that and potentially jail time, because it's just flat out fraud. It's an interesting world we live in. Do you have any more questions about pump.fun before we move on to the next scariness happening in crypto at the moment?
No, I want to create some kind of a repeat sound auto-tune thing of you being like, I was thinking about pumping. That's my main takeaway from this. All right. So one quick hit. I did do somewhat quick math. So if you go to end of 2021, the top 10 stocks in the S&P 500 were a little under 30%.
Yeah.
If you go to now, we're looking at a little under 40%. So that's roughly where we are, more concentrated today. Michael Saylor. Oh, Michael Saylor. We're continuing on the train of cryptocurrencies, but specifically, we're talking about Bitcoin for years now. Since 2021, we have been discussing MicroStrategy, which is Michael Saylor's company. Used to be an analytics company. I myself, at a prior organization, used MicroStrategy's analytics platform. They, a few years ago, shifted their strategy to not so much of an analytics platform as much as they are a Bitcoin buying and holding organization. That's a little bit of background. Michael Saylor has a 3-minute pitch to Microsoft. Micro, match made in heaven. What his pitch is about Microsoft having a, as he describes it, like an obligation to do the right thing. And that's to become a Bitcoin repository, just like MicroStrategy. That's the high level. I want to play.
I'm going to jump in and then you're going to play it. And I'm so excited for this. But this actually, it's funny you brought up something that happened to you at work this week, Douglas, because I had my version of Jeremy pop up for me at work this week. And I trusted him a ton. So I told him to create my slides for me. I said, Jeremy, got 3 minutes to present to the board. I thought Jeremy would come back with, 5 slides, maybe 2 slides. My man Jeremy came back with 120 slides. For those who don't know, this Michael Saylor audio we're going to play you, he has 60 slides? It's a 3-minute presentation. And literally these slides have all sorts of mumbo jumbo. Bitcoin is the greatest thing ever. And he'll be like, Bitcoin is the future. And then he'll switch slides.
Yes.
I've never seen this. I've never seen anything like this.
It's remarkable. And we will have this on the Substack, skippydoogles.substack.com. We will have this on the Substack on Monday, so you can take a look at the whole thing. Just like Skippy is saying, we're going to play 45 seconds of audio, so you'll hear what he's saying. When you look at the actual slides, there are slides with 70 words on them. And he says some phrase that is seemingly unrelated to what is on the slide.
Seriously.
It's quite wonderful.
That all ends with like, this is the magic elixir of life. It's basically the holy grail. If you buy Bitcoin, you will never die.
Basically. All right. You ready for it?
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
Digital capital is economically and technically superior to physical capital, and it represents a revolutionary advance in capital preservation. The asset class itself is growing from trillions to hundreds of trillions of dollars, and it is backed by digital power along with political and economic power. It makes sense for Microsoft to be powered by digital capital. Bitcoin's the best asset you can own. The numbers speak for themselves. It makes a lot more sense to buy Bitcoin than to buy your own stock back, or to hold Bitcoin rather than holding bonds. If you're going to outperform, you're going to need Bitcoin.
All right, I'll just stop there.
This is like, okay, have you ever been like with a 4-year-old who wants a puppy? And you're like,
yes.
Yeah, I don't really know. Talk to me about why you, and they're like, puppies are the best thing in the whole world. Puppies are best friends. Puppies don't cost much to feed. Puppies fix your boo-boos. Puppy. He just everything. Bitcoin is the best.
I
It's
did.
just a bunch of
So
sentences.
legitimately, as an aside, I think it was 3 years ago, my son wanted a PS5, PlayStation 5. And I'm like, no, you already got your Nintendo Switch. You don't need a PlayStation 5. You just want this because other people are getting it. Like, that's not cool. However, if you can, to your point, if you can provide a presentation to me, because I want to see how you put these things together, your thoughts together, that convinces me, then we can talk about it. I tell you, this gentleman came back with a presentation about how him having a PlayStation 5 would heal the world. It would bring the community together. He was saying that there are people that may not be able to afford it, and they can come to our home and they can get the joy of having the PlayStation 5, and so friendships will become stronger. So
He's
then,
he's got to bring homeless kids to the house
yeah,
so they can
yeah.
experience the joy.
So he gives this presentation. I was like, there's like a lot of logic here. Like, and this was 3 years ago. He's a bit younger. I was like, I'm impressed with this. Then I go on a business trip. My wife texts me later, and she says that my son goes up to him and she says, "Do you think that what you did was convincing for dad?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, he likes those heartstrings." It's like this manipulative, and it was very impressive. Okay, back to Michael Saylor. There are a few points I'd like to bring up, and please interject with what
Yeah.
you want to bring up in here. And again, y'all could not see the slides, but there was at the beginning of what we were just playing for you, when he says that digital capital is superior to other capital. I'm going to say some of the words that are on this slide.
Mm-hmm.
No tenants, no weather, no traffic, no corrosion, no mayor,
What does it mean? What?
no trouble. No trouble? What? Yeah, like what does any
Again,
of
if
this
I
mean?
present anything like this to the board, I mean, if the board has a brain, they kick me out. You wrote no traffic on a slide and
Yeah.
said digital capital is superior.
Yes, exactly. And here's a art of precision. Bitcoin is going to grow to 200 plus trillion dollars in 21 years is on one of the slides.
Yep. Exactly 21. Don't you
Okay.
know? He'll tell you the day too. So yeah, you can keep going. He also came out this week, and we're gonna connect it also. If you're a Bitcoin lover, don't switch shows yet. It's not all doom and gloom. But he says that a coin will eventually be worth $13 million per Bitcoin. I mean, oddly specific. We're in Kathy Wood land here. Fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
That being said, if Microsoft chose to put 1% of their cash balance in Bitcoin, I would not think that's a terrible decision. I could consider that being somewhat rational. Like,
It must be because, okay, quick quiz. What is the minimum amount that Microsoft would create in value if it decided to have a Bitcoin strategy?
oh, I'm sure it's massive. And the reason it's massive, Doogles, is what we got to talk about.
I need a number.
The current
I need a number.
Well, the current estimated free float of Bitcoin is only 2.4 million Bitcoin, which is only about 12% of what's available. So, like, this is not, it's fairly liquid, but if big players, if crazy companies like MicroStrategy choose to issue debt over and over and over, when there's not that much of it out there being traded, of course you drive the price up. I mean, and yeah, it could go to 13 million if there's someone idiotic enough to spend whatever 100 million on it when there's not that much out there. So it's not a true representation of the value, and the value is a whole other thing we're going to get to. Let me tell you.
We will, and I want to come exactly back to the point that you were just raising to answer the question, because you're not participating in the quiz in the way I wanted you to. $1 trillion is the minimum. In this presentation, Michael Saylor has a slide that says Microsoft can create between 1 trillion and 4.9 trillion dollars. So at a minimum, it's $1 trillion. Of course you would want them to partake in this. I have one last thing, and then we can move on. The last thing, because I just loved this language. So there was a point there, you heard the overview of this in the audio that we played, but you would not have guessed that the slide said this. It was when he was talking about being a holder of Bitcoin and comparing it to bonds. The headline of this slide is Bitcoin is vital, bonds are toxic.
Mm-hmm.
Then he has a number on here that shows bonds over 10 years losing 99.7% of value. Any of the sources he has on here, footnotes he has on here, do not relate to bonds losing 99.7% of their value. So I don't know where that comes from, Michael Saylor. The rest of this was like bulletproof, but this one point.
None of this was bulletproof. It's a bunch of made up mumbo jumbo. Okay. Michael Saylor is currently, when he issues debt to buy more Bitcoin, he talks about Bitcoin yield. Do I even have to go here, Douglas? I almost feel like I just want to tell people in case you hear about it. This is him with mathematics crafting something that says an asset that produces zero, like there's zero dividends, there's zero cash flows. Bitcoin does not spit off profits like a company does. Everyone knows that. He has spun it so he says, and I can tell you the math if you really care, but he has spun it so he says, oh, this relates to a Bitcoin yield of 3%, as if the asset makes money. No, nope, dude, nope. You just need some fancy mathematics to justify the fact that you want to buy more of the thing.
I'm down to wrap the Michael Saylor portion of this. I want you to move on to your Confucius style questioning.
Let's go to Crazy Land. If we want to hang out with Saylor, let's go to Crazy Land. I'll start with the caveat. If you're a Bitcoin guy, congrats. Guy or gal, congrats. If you're someone that bought it back in 2011 or whatever, awesome. I don't think there's any chance you still hold it, but great. Maybe if you lost your access code, like maybe you still hold it. But
if you are in a landfill right now searching for a flash drive, I'm sorry.
What's happened to you, if you've been a true believer, is like this religion caught fire, maybe just with one person who's crazy enough to have hundreds of millions of dollars to buy the thing, meaning Michael Saylor. But certainly you've got the El Salvador government and some other things. So there's people that believe in the same concept as you and that showed up in the price. By all means, that's great.
Yeah, do your thing.
I have more of a hypothetical question, and I would love help, like crowdsourcing here. So if you own an asset that can't be assigned a fair value, is it possible for that asset to make your life better?
Can you extrapolate a bit more? Here's why. When I read this, the first question that popped in my mind is, what asset does make my life better? So like, I wasn't sure how to compare this to.
That's fair. I'm trying to I really want to keep it high level for a reason, but it's too generic right now. I don't know. I mean, but the simplest contrast is $1, right? If I have $10 and I need some food, I can go get some food. So dollars clearly equate to the cost of a Big Mac. We'll jump to the chase and go straight to Bitcoin here. My question for the Bitcoin bulls is, well, you bought the thing at $5 and now it's trading for 100,000. Like, should you sell it? Or do you believe, like Michael Saylor seems to believe, that it's going to be worth 13 million? So you can't sell it till it gets to 13 million. And then say it gets to 13 million, someone else is going to be saying it's worth 50 million. So like, when do you actually get, if you're a true believer, when do you actually get to be like, hey, I made this brilliant bet and now I like actually want to live in a house instead of an apartment? Like, can I translate this asset into things that actually might make my life better? How do you ever know? With any stock I buy, I can very clearly and easily, and I do, make estimates for fair value, and I get this profit stream and this cash flow stream and all these other things. And I know what's happening in the business that day. I know if retail's struggling or if Guinness is short on supply. Like, all these things are readily available to me, where it's very easy for me to say, I expect this to go on. This is the same argument with gold, Doogles. Similar, except at least gold like gets used in jewelry and stuff. So you can kind of connect gold to like physical uses in the real world.
This makes me think about my somewhat fatalistic, maybe extremely, but somewhat fatalistic view on when Bitcoin does become valuable. If I were what I see as the closest thing to an investor in Bitcoin, not a speculator. And again, if you speculate, you do your thing, you make money, cool, do your thing. But if you're thinking of yourself as an investor in Bitcoin, the bet that I believe people have to be making is that the world's financial system collapses. And the 4 people that work on the servers in volunteer capacity are still doing that. But the financial world collapses. In that world, the fair market value is basically priceless. You hold it. I mean, it's nowhere near 100,000. It's 100, 200, 1,000 times what it is right now. You are hodling until your kids are taking your Bitcoin. I mean, that's not a number, but basically, if that's the bet that you're making, never sell.
No, but so that's my question. So if you believe that, and to me, this most equates to a religion. If you believe you were early to this religion and the rest of the world is going to come on board to this religion, which, man, I'll tell you, the religion takes a huge step forward if the US government creates a small Bitcoin reserve, if someone like Microsoft actually puts 1% of their corporate balances, it's catching fire as a religion. But what is the point of, I'll call it, wealth? Like, is it to see a big number on your Coinbase account that you can never spend because you always say, well, wait till the religion catches fire in China and India? And like, what is the ultimate point of money, and how does Bitcoin fit into that? Because the other thing, we're given a pretty rosy picture. The other thing that happens is the float increases significantly because someone bought 3 million Bitcoins back in 2011 and they decide to unload those, or the Microsoft doesn't buy it, MicroStrategy defaults on their debt, and the US government never actually buys it, and it goes very close to zero or significantly less than it is to, like, those possibilities are equally likely, in my opinion. And I just can't bet my house on it, right? How could you? That's what I don't understand.
It's similar to what you say when we talk about shorting stocks. There are sets of people that are showing up every day to a company, trying to make that company more valuable, and you're betting against them. Now, that's always not purely the case. Sometimes it's about financial audit. If you audit the books and it looks like a fraud, there's other things. But like in general, I think it's an interesting, like, general case. If you play this out to what you were saying, buying Bitcoin is shorting the financial system.
Oh, I think it's even, I mean, I know what you're saying there, but that's a really simple example. I think there's many more complexities to it.
Well, the reason I make it that simple is to play out what you were saying. Is the downside of this is that the financial system, which everyone shows up to try and make more valuable, is what you're betting against.
Yeah.
I mean,
and the reason people, I mean, to me, to go back to my crazy hypothetical question, the reason I show up in the financial system is because if my family needs medical care, that current US financial system allows me to give them that need. If my family needs a house, the current financial system allows me to do that.
That's right.
And I don't have a concern about if that value is going to double in the next month or be cut in half in the next month.
That's right.
Like I would.
Now that's the investment case. But going back to the speculator, like if you want to be a speculator here, because then you could say, actually, no. If I'm speculating on this, my bet is not that the financial system collapses. That's not what I'm betting on. I'm betting on the perception of the financial system not providing justice for the greater population, and people believing that makes Bitcoin go up. And so actually my speculation is on perception of the financial system. And I would say right now, if that's what you want to play, that's what you want to play. That's different than, again, for me, that's different than the investment thesis, like the long-term, what's the potential quote unquote fair market value? That's very different. This is just a bet on public perception.
No,
and you're making a bet.
I promise to get off this. We're going to talk about Howard Marks in just a second. But so that, I think that bet can be somewhat reasonable. And if it's 1 or 2% of your assets, I can get on board, because you can make a case that makes sense. My point still comes back to, but you put 2% of your assets in this for 10 years and all of a sudden the asset's worth $1 million a coin. Like, do you get to actually sell then? Do you get to actually take a vacation? I mean,
I
there's no way to ever say this is fair. There's no way. Yeah. So it's just a bunch of hocus pocus. Yep. Someone answer that question for me. Someone answer.
Yeah.
You do the smart thing in quotes here. You put a little bit aside, you make crazy returns. Like, when do you actually get to enjoy it? The only thing I can think about is, if you bought 1,000 coins in 2012, sat on them, like, sure, you could sell 20% of that now, but couldn't you sell 20% of it back when it reached $5,000 a coin or $10,000 a coin? Or
Yep. All right. Transition.
Yeah.
Okay. Reach into the fishbowl, pulling out Howard Marks. Howard Marks runs Oaktree, predominantly a credit investor, bonds, knows those very well, knows debt very well. He had a piece, one of his memos that he came out. And by the way, in this piece, he used the phrase, the most important thing, which is the name of his book, which I'm a big fan of. I haven't seen him use that in a memo for a hot minute. So just want to shout that out. He had a memo that came out back in October. I finally read it this week. It is titled Ruminating on Asset Allocation. I think that there are a few key fundamental points that he raises in here that I just love how he portrays them. I mean, Howard Marks, that's to me, that's the beauty of his writing, is how he takes complex concepts and makes them sound much simpler. And I want to point out a few of those. Would love to get your response and your take on some. So the first thing he says is that from his point of view, asset allocation as a concept is pretty new. He goes back to when he joined the investment world 50 plus years ago. And he's saying back then it was a 60-40 portfolio thing. Like you put 60% of your portfolio in stocks, you put 40% in bonds, you declared that diversified, bada boom, bada bing, we're good. That's asset allocation. Mm-hmm. But now there's so many more options and therefore so many more questions that people ask. I'm going to rattle through some of the questions he lists here. How much in equities and how much in debt? How much in stocks and bonds and how much in alternatives? How much in public securities and how much in private assets? How much in one's home country and how much abroad? How much of the latter in the developed world and how much in emerging markets? How much in high quality assets and how much in low quality? How much in more volatile, quote unquote, high beta assets and how much in steadier ones? How much in real assets? How much in leveraged strategies and how much unlevered? How much in derivatives, right? That gives you a sense where he's saying when people are looking at asset allocation now, there's so many different lenses and angles that folks are taking.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in there. This is why at least 50% of the population hears about investing and just gets a headache and gives up, right?
That's right.
We've made this way too complex, and there's always someone peddling something new because there's money to be made in it. But it's a little sad. That's my favorite part of the memo is where you're going next and how he is going to talk about this versus how it typically gets talked about on CNBC.
And so he says, there are only two asset classes, ownership and debt. If someone wants to participate financially in a business, the essential choice is between A, owning part of it, and B, making a loan to it. I love the simplicity around that. Any reaction there before I go on?
Well, I love ownership. So debt serves its purpose, and I think we should all hold some debt. But ownership is consistently in a capitalist society the easiest path to wealth, whether that's through entrepreneurship, equity ownership, or something else. Once you become an owner, your mindset has to change and your wealth creation abilities increase 10x without a doubt. So I wish more people would talk about stock ownership as true company ownership, because that's exactly what it is.
Now, the next part is where I really start to get jolly. So I love the simplicity of what he throws out there. I think it's awesome. Love it, love it, love it. Next, he talks about risk posture. And this applies for me to so much more than investing. When I was reading this, I was thinking about investing in my portfolio. Then I started thinking about the way that businesses think and operate and how this applies there in general. So I found this part to be awesome sauce. He says, one decision matters more than and should be the basis for all the other decisions in the portfolio management process. It's the selection of a targeted risk posture or the desired balance between aggressiveness and defensiveness. Then he lays out those two items. So on defensiveness, which is insistence on preserving capital. I think that is a strong phrase to say what defensiveness is. Calls for an emphasis on defense, which precludes pursuing maximum growth. Then the offensive posture. A decision to strive to maximize growth requires an emphasis on offense, meaning preservation of capital and steadiness must be sacrificed to some degree. That's where, in thinking about operating in the business context, I also think that that's such a valuable way to look at how you are operating your organization. How much cash are we sticking with? We've talked about this plenty of times in the podcast. How much are we deploying? And at different points in time. I don't have the quotes for when he talks about this, but he then discusses after this point, he says, what one also has to decide is, are you going to just stick with one posture? Like, are you saying I'm a defensive investor and this is the way I'm going to run it forever? Or Do you have I'm making up numbers, he didn't give numbers. Do you have a situation where like 90% of the time I'm going to play defense, but 10% of the time, which feels at least at a high level closer to like where Warren Buffett plays as an investor, 10% of the time I'm going to get aggressive.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you're not doing anything on the other times, but like super aggressive. Then here is creme de la creme players. You can't simultaneously emphasize both preservation of capital and maximization of growth, or defense and offense. This is the fundamental, inescapable truth in investing. I would also, going back to the operating a business, this is a fundamental, inescapable truth in business. And I think very often people get caught up in the investing world and the business world trying to like basically do both at the exact same time. And I don't mean balancing, because balancing, I think, is a different thing, but not being clear on their posture, whether it's offense and defense, and not being clear on whether it's all the time or 90-10 or whatever the split was. So if you have your portfolio, just know which you are. I love that. I love the risk posture part of this. I've got two more things, but pop in.
Well, so if you're an index investor, you're likely saying, what does this even mean and how does it apply to me? It means one thing: decide your ideal mix of stocks and bonds, understand what that means in terms of your risk profile. He has this awesome graph in the bottom where he shows like a typical probability of return of debt, which is going to be relatively predictable. You'll have high confidence that you make 4% on your bond payment versus curve for holding stocks, which you have much less confidence. So your returns should be better on average, but you can certainly have years where they're worse than the bond holdings and years where they're significantly better. Just pick your current setup. Again, to the balance perspective that you're talking about, it's not necessarily that you're doing both at the same time. It's that like what's the trade-off between the two and where do you ultimately want to end up? Pick that and be done with it. And then if you're a more sophisticated investor, you can do a little more with this. But the thing I love about the piece is just it's either ownership or debt. Brilliant.
Yeah, it is. I'll just end with one last thing: market efficiency. I like this one thing he says about market efficiency. We've talked about the efficient market hypothesis on here in the past. And for those that are not as familiar, the way I would describe it is that at all given times, market prices reflect the information that's in the market or out in public. And so therefore you can't beat the market because everything's already reflected. So you've got no advantage. What he says is this, and I think this is pretty cool. He says markets may do an efficient job of A, rapidly incorporating new information, and B, accurately reflecting the resulting consensus opinion concerning the right price for each asset given the totality of information. But that opinion can be far from correct. That last piece, I think, is what is critical for folks to get. Because I would agree, markets can incorporate it, like they can show you all the information. They can also incorporate that information into prices. That does not mean that it's incorporated correctly.
Cool.
You are not impressed.
This memo ended with a thought. Like, I picture him writing this on the plane back from Australia, and then he had like a few more things to say, and the little beep goes off, and it's like, oh, time for breakfast in LA. And he's like, I'd better just wrap this up. Here's a few bullet points. Peace out. It's just what I picture.
Okay, the
I
ending
thought the first 80% was brilliant.
Ending may not be as strong, but we'll put this on the Substack. It's worth a read. I continue to love how he takes complexity and simplifies it, and do agree with you that the point around ownership and debt is key. Simplification. You got anything else?
No, I'm going to save the rest for next week. I will say I liked more Brazilian stocks. There might be some deals there. It's kind of scary, though. I mean, good investing in the trash heap, though, is always scary, right? That's how you get the true deals. So I'm enjoying that. Thanks for sending that our way. Doogles, I'm debating for the holiday season if we should discount the premium subscriptions to the podcast. It'll allow a few people to get their foot in the door. What do you think about that?
Give the people what they want.
You should see the pain on his face right now, listeners. You should see the pain. All right. That's it. All thanks for the show. SkippyDoogles.com. We are going into our fourth year as a podcast?
No, we're finishing our fourth year.
Yeah. Absolute craziness over here. We will, speaking of premium episodes, we will do portfolio reviews early in the year, probably the first week of January, if not the second week. And other than that, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, everybody.